Hello and welcome everyone to 2023. So last year I had a channel called Truth Lies and Hair Ties where I would create a hairstyle and I would talk about animals in the wild or captivity. That's changed slightly now and it's going to be called Facts, Fiction and Fabric. So I'm basically going to be creating something whilst still talking about animals. So I'm going to be making some flowers for this little skirt that I've upcycled. Well, it was a pair of trousers. I've made a few already and I've just cut out the petals ready to be sewn. So today the topic that we're going to be talking about are whales in the wild, in the oceans, and how we are unfortunately affecting them and not in a particularly good way. I found this article probably about a couple of months ago now. So it's from the Times and it was written by Rise Blakely, who is a science correspondent for the Times. And it says, research suggests that the whales, which can weigh 150 tonnes, consume more microplastics and fragments and fibres smaller than 5 millimetres than any other animal. The findings mean that ocean pollution poses a greater risk to the health of the world's largest creatures than was previously thought. The study drew on data on the feeding behaviour of 191 blue, fin and humpback whales, which were tagged and tracked as they foraged off the coast of California. Blue whales live off krill, tiny shrimp-like crustaceans. Now it's actually the krill that are eating the microplastics and then the whales are eating the krill. So that's how they're basically getting it into their system. Consumption rates are likely even higher for whales foraging in more polluted regions such as the Mediterranean. There is concern that the microplastics made the whales' diets less nutritious because of course there are chemicals that are added to plastics. So this can of course be very toxic. Whales are not alone in consuming plastic, which was first reported in marine food webs 50 years ago and has now been found in at least 1,000 species. The unique concern for the whales is that they can consume so much. It was actually in 2004 that a professor called Richard Thompson and his team managed to show that microplastics had actually accumulated in the 1960s. So I guess these sort of worry now is what is it doing to the whales? It might be something that they can't really see or tell now. It could be a long-term effect. So maybe some of their organs start failing, maybe some other things start shutting down. It sounds like quite a slow death actually. I'm hoping it's not going to be quite as bad as that, but I don't really know the toxic levels that are in those microplastics, and if they are consuming so much every single day, then it's probably not going to be anything particularly great. They also said that these poor whales are still recovering from when they actually did the whaling. So of course there were quite a few companies and countries that decided not to hunt for whales because their numbers were dwindling, and they thought, okay, let's give these, you know, a little bit of a rest and bring their numbers up. But we know that there was one country that decided to carry on again, which was Japan. So I mean, hopefully their numbers are still getting better, but that still is a risk for them. Now we've got the microplastics, and then, which I don't know why I hadn't thought about before, noise pollution. Our seas are getting more and more congested these days, which makes sense because you've got all kinds of ships and boats and cargo vessels. I mean, there must be all kinds, and a lot of animals are very, very sensitive to sound. And of course, whales, they use sound to communicate with each other, to locate where food is. And I think if that is disrupted, then it's going to make it very difficult for them. Not to mention distressing. And of course, the biggest offender for that is going to be the oil companies, the fracking. The blasts that they use must be absolutely horrific if you're a creature under the water and you're anywhere near that. I think it could possibly be very disorientating, especially if you're quite a big creature. Now, for those of you who don't know fracking, I'm going to put a little a little picture up here to show exactly what they do in order to, well, it's not actually just oil, they get all kinds of things from it. Basically, they fracture the rock formation at the bottom of the seabed or wherever the actual rocks are, which doesn't sound particularly great already. And they do that by using a pressurized injection of fracking fluid, which is actually usually, I think it's sand, and they might mix it with water as well. So things that they might get from doing these types of blasts, one of them is called brine, which is like a high concentration solution of salt, which can be used in cooking and like the de-icing of roads. Of course, crude oil, which is used in petrol, diesel, plastics, paints, and all kinds of other bits and pieces.
I mean, these marine mammals depend on sound. What's going to happen?
The Wild Coast faces a massive assault on its entire marine ecosystem.
From the 1st of December 2021, Shell and Shearwater Geoservices plan to undergo a seismic survey of the Wild Coast. The search for oil and gas will take 5 months, stretching over an area of 6,000 kilometers squared. Seismic surveys are carried out to investigate subsea geological formations. This involves directing sound energy towards the seabed using up to 48 air guns towed by a vessel. The sound energy is reflected back to the surface in the hopes of detecting crude oil or gas. The only cause for concern is that these blasts will blast continuously every 10 seconds, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for 5 months straight. With each blast, at over 200 decibels, it can be compared to that of a nuclear bomb. The negative impact of seismic surveying is becoming more and more evident as research continues to unveil the consequences.
And if you want to sign a petition against this, here is the website you'll need. So not only is the noise very bad, but of course over the years there have been quite a few oil spillages as well. That's not going to be great for any of the animals that are nearby. Now, because of this noise disruption, it could also mean that whales aren't eating as frequently, because they might have a usual hunting ground that they go to, but if it's been disturbed by certain noises, or they just simply can't locate the food, then it's going to make it a lot more difficult for them. And because of this, there's another threat, and that's collisions. And I hadn't really thought about this either. I know I've seen a couple of YouTube videos where whales get really, really close to boats, and some of the people, you know, you see them and they're looking a bit terrified, like, oh my goodness, is my boat gonna tip over or something? But I'm talking about like the cargo vessels. There was actually, this is, I'm going to give you a bit of a warning now, because I'm going to show some photos which are just absolutely horrific, really just not nice. And you can clearly see that it's a boat that's done this damage. But yes, if you're a bit squirmish and you don't particularly want to see, it's only sort of like on the fins and stuff, but it still doesn't look particularly great. I'll put a couple here. And there was a YouTube video that I found, and it was actually not a cargo vessel. This was a cruise liner. So I don't know if you've heard of the Princess cruises that they have. Well, it's just a short clip, but this one's not particularly nice either. So if you don't want to see a dead whale stuck on the front of a boat, then skip this a minute and a half. I'll put the timestamp down just in case for you.
In our top story today, the Sapphire Princess cruise ship arrives at Vancouver port with an extra passenger. Let's take a look.
Holiday makers on board this cruise liner arrived in Vancouver with an extra passenger. The Sapphire Princess cruise ship had impaled a whale on the ship's bow. Spectators looked on as divers attached ropes to the 20-metre-long mammal, allowing a small boat to tug the whale off of the vessel. A spokesman from the cruise company said the whale was discovered as the liner prepared to enter the harbour. Craig Della Hunt works at the port. He says the mammal probably died on impact with the ship.
That bow is kind of like a spear, and once they're hit by it, it probably breaks their back, probably kills them almost instantly.
Princess Cruise Lines didn't comment on how long the whale had been attached to the vessel, but some here say it was probably struck further north as the boat travelled from Alaska to Vancouver.
I'm now going to talk a little bit about Moon. She is a very large whale, but unfortunately from this photo that you'll be able to see here, her spine was broken, and they do think it could have been a collision with a boat. Now, what was really interesting about her story is the fact that she didn't just stay in that place and accept her fate and think, well, this is the end, so I'll just rest wherever I am. I think, you know, we're all creature of habits, and especially for certain animals, you know, they might have feeding ground, hunting ground, all sorts of different places that perhaps they travel to. And this whale decided, well, this was not the end of her journey. She obviously wanted to travel somewhere else. Maybe it's where their family meet, or who knows. But she travelled an extremely long way with a broken spine, which I can't even imagine how difficult that would be when, you know, your tail pretty much is not working. How on earth did she manage to swim as far as she did? I don't know, but it was quite incredible. And then basically once she got to where she needed to get to, I think she did, you know, pass away. Now, this isn't, you know, 100%, they don't actually know if it was a collision with a boat, but it's such severe damage, you know, something very, very large had to actually have caused this. So since 2007, the International Whaling Commission logged over 1,200 collisions with ships and whales. But they think there was probably many more that have, you know, not been registered or not been talked about, which is a hell of a lot. And I mean, I was thinking, you know, if whales rely on sound, then why can they surely not know that there's a massive boat or something behind them? And of course it's the sound, isn't it? If these boats are giving off a tremendous amount of sound, it can be disorientating, and so it might be a bit too late before they know what's going on or what's nearby. You know, this is what can happen. I found so many upsetting photos of dead whales on the front of ships, and there have been quite a few actually that can't shake them during their ride or wherever they're going. And they have to wait until they're in port and get loads of other people to come on or go around the boat and try and take the whale off the front. I mean, it's horrible. I do hope that they die instantly, but you know, it's awful. But there is a little bit of good news. Michael Andre and his team at the Technical University of Catalonia in Barcelona has actually come up with a device that hopefully will be able to warn ships or let them know, you know, if there's animals nearby, which I think will be great, because then they'll be able to maybe move off course slightly, or, you know, at least they'll be more aware. Will they use these for the fracking companies? I do hope so. I'm not sure how far animals have to be away in order for these fracking blasts to be considered safe. But if they do use these, you know, I think it will be a lot more useful. Now I'm going to talk about whales beaching themselves. There's always been all kinds of speculation around why whales do that, and some scientists think that it could be because of noise pollution. It's distressing, again, disorientating. They may not know where things are, or you know, they can't communicate to other whales. Maybe this is what's causing the beaching. And when they have mass beaching, which is obviously when there are just lots and lots of whales, some scientists think, well, that's quite interesting, let's look into that a little bit more. And there was a mass beaching right after the use of Navy solar. And so perhaps, again, that was really quite distressing for them, because we don't actually know what this is doing to their brain or their insides. We know what stress can do to us humans. It can be a killer, can't it? It can be really awful, and it can actually cause so many more different problems that you didn't think could be caused from having stress. And many animals have had hearing problems and even complete hearing loss. Also, they think that the build-up of these stress-related chemicals can be linked to fertility problems and poor health. And you may ask, how do you know if a whale is stressed or not? Well, I thought I'd do a little bit of digging again on YouTube. I found this little short video.
These grey whales here live in a really urban environment, so they're constantly exposed to a lot of vessel traffic mainly, and really we want to know whether there are long-term consequences of that to their health and physiology. So is it stressing them out?
The Oregon State University researcher wants to know how underwater noise affects whales.
Yeah, that's good. That'll drift along and record all the stuff that the whale's hearing.
The noisy engines of passing ships and fishing boats drown out whale calls, which could be a problem.
Ocean noise across the world really is increasing and has been over the last few decades, mainly because of shipping traffic and vessel noise. We've seen that whales and dolphins have behavioral reactions to elevated noise levels, but we're not really sure of the long-term impacts of that.
So, she's using all kinds of research tools to do health checkups on the whales.
Come on, little buddy.
It comes in the form of a reddish-brown cloud in the water.
Oh, Jeffrey, poop! Yep.
Once they spot it, they need to move fast to scoop the poop before it sinks.
If we can collect that fecal sample, that's where that, a load of biological information is available, so we can do genetics on the individual and find out its sex, as well as collect the stress information.
It was actually in 2015 that they introduced the tax on single plastic bags. And that's when cosmetics stopped using those like little micro beads when using like exfoliants and things. So I don't know if you've ever used like maybe a face exfoliator and they've had like little bits in. Quite a lot of them used to be plastic beads. I didn't even know that. I don't actually use that type of thing anymore, and a lot of companies don't. But of course, when you're washing all of that off your face, it's going down the drain, and then where are all those little plastic beads ending up? Well, I think we can all guess. So I'm pleased that quite a lot of them don't. But always be aware, have a look at certain products and just make sure that they don't have plastic in. What am I going to try and change for 2023? I'm probably just going to try and carry on as to what I was doing last year, but I think I'm going to try a little bit more. And that's just use of plastic. It's so difficult to go into a supermarket and not buy something that's got plastic wrapped around it. I have a plastic bottle that's got my washing up liquid, and I try and find places where I can refill it. Sometimes I have to drive quite far, but I'm going to try. And this summer I'd like to sign up for like a beach cleanup. I think we might have a couple that are nearby, and obviously that's just a day where you spend your time on a beach, but you're collecting garbage basically, and plastic and all sorts of bits and pieces you can find. I remember last summer my mother and I were on a beach sunbathing and we saw something floating in the water. And we thought, oh, come on, let's go and have a look. And it looked like a very large plastic water container, but it was square, it was huge. And it was full of liquid, but we thought, well, we're not actually going to open it and find out that it's something completely different. But we thought, you know, we'd take it out and at least, you know, sort of throw it away at the top. But the beach we have are pebbles, and it's not nice and flat. It was very, very hilly. So there's me and my mum trying to drag this thing up. I mean, carrying it we did for a while, but that was too tiring. And then we saw this guy come over. He looked very official and he had some kind of a uniform on, and he just went, "Thanks, ladies," picked it up and walked off like it weighed absolutely nothing. And everyone on the beach looked at us like, two grown women couldn't even pick that up. But we felt like we'd done our bit, and I'd like to get a little bit more involved. So yes, if that's something you're interested in, maybe you've got a local one, just type in beach cleanups around my area and you might find something. So this is the little flower that I made today with some little buttons in, and I'm not quite sure where I'm going to put this. I might put this here, and then with my few others that I've made as well, might put that one on that side. Right, well that's it for today. I will see you in a couple of weeks.